Hi, this is Paul Palmer. Today I want to talk about risk management. Now, I know this is a topic we've discussed before a couple of times, but I do feel that it's quite underrated. Many companies just put the risk management tool, the function, as part of their quality management system. They consider that the risks don't need to really be addressed unless there's a rationale behind them. So they've had a failure, a deviation. But they should also be part of the change management process. And even further above that, you should actually be doing your risk management to actually design your quality management system. So, what do I mean by that? Well, in pharmaceuticals, there's risks in the way that we do things, in the way that we manage them, in the way that we set them up in the first place. So, for example, if you've got a product that's new to the market, and there's a right, let's take an example. Let's take this new pandemic and the Pfizer vaccine. So the Pfizer vaccine, there's always going to be a risk because there's a percentage that succeed and a percentage that fail with the vaccination. So I think they've said 95% are actually successful in achieving the antibodies because I believe that's how they're testing it. Now, personally, you wouldn't, not personally, ethically, you wouldn't be testing it by giving somebody a dose of the um, of the virus and then seeing whether it works or not. So the risk is that that's not representative when you're doing your tests in control conditions. That's not representative of how it actually um, not functions, but uh, well, I suppose function is a good way to put it. The way that it actually works in real life, in vivo, as it were. Similarly, if the actual vaccine's only given to a limited population, and you get a level of adverse reactions, which could just be a small headache or a runny nose or something else. If all the adverse reactions that you get are only small, then they say, oh, well, that's low risk. And then the regulators approve the vaccine for use. But then maybe you've done 30,000 people. Now, when you move that on to actual vaccinations of a larger population of people, maybe I think it's 400,000. I think the first run of this vaccine that's coming from Pfizer is 800,000 doses. So you've got 400,000 people. Okay, so you're upscaling. So say they did 30, let's say they did 40,000 just to make the numbers easy. So they've done 40,000 and they've got an acceptable level of adverse reactions. But now they're going to go up to 10 times that. Now, bear in mind, when Pfizer did their own risk assessment, they actually put into the terms of supply, I don't know the exact document, that they're not liable for any adverse reactions. Now, maybe that's because of the level of testing. Maybe that's because of the level of risk. Or maybe it's just because we don't know enough about the virus yet. It is really quite new in terms of being studied. And normally something like this, you're looking at maybe 5 years, 10 years before you've got all the details and you really understand it and you can be certain that your vaccination's going to work. So we've spent probably 12 months researching it. I know it was available some time ago, but I think really, realistically, it's about 12 months. Now, that's really fast in terms of normal research practices. So they've done their risk assessment. They say, well, we normally would do more work than this, but we know it's really important to get the result, to get the impact. So from our perspective, we don't want to take the risk of being prosecuted if there's adverse reactions in 10%, 50%, 30%, however many, because bear in mind the prosecution could be, oh, well, it didn't work, so somebody died. So that's a lot of money to prosecute against. It doesn't mean that necessarily they're worried about adverse reactions. It could just be they don't want to be prosecuted for it not working. Okay, so where do we go next? Well, now you've got 10 times the number of people and you want to see what the risk profile is. Well, as you carry out the vaccinations, any immediate responses you're going to see. And under the pharmacovigilance process, you'll use that data to update the risk profile. And that's what a business should be doing. When they've got the risk profile for how they're operating the business, as things change, as things move, as they get more information, more data, they should be updating the risk profile for the business, whether that's for business contingency, whether that's the approach to supply, whether that's the approach to the whole of the supply chain, where they're buying from, where they store the product, who's involved, which subcontractors, which partners they use, and which customers they're willing to supply to. Because even the supply chain, even the final supply to the customer is risk-based. We can't necessarily be certain every single time that the checks that we've done are going to ensure we only supply to verifiable, to bona fide customers. So when we update our data, we should be updating the risk assessment. So as part of pharmacovigilance, Pfizer will be updating their risk assessment each time they get data back. But how often is the data going to come back? Well, they're doing 400,000 vaccines. Well, they're not going to be all at once, are they? So let's say the 400,000 comes over 4 weeks, just to make the numbers easy again, because we like easy data. I know real life's not like this, but if it was a computer doing it, I wouldn't be so worried. So we've got 100,000 doses going out in the first week, 100 doses in the second week. But then when we come to the third week, we've got the second dose for the first set, because I think it's 2 weeks apart. And then we've got the first dose for the third 100,000. And then in the fourth week, well, you might be getting feedback from your week 1 study, from your week 1 vaccination. It's not a study anymore, is it? Because some people may have had a reaction in the first week. They may have had a reaction to the third week vaccination, but it may take a week for that to come back. And then those in the second week get theirs in the fourth week as well. Their second vaccination in the fourth week, but also the people from the third week could be getting their response, their reactions in the fourth week as well. And then, of course, you add on to that the fourth week of vaccinations. So you've got a gradual build-up of data. So after the first week's results, your first 100,000, you're going to have some data from the first vaccination. The second week, you're going to have more data, maybe a little bit extra from the first week, but mainly from the second week, the next 100,000. And then in the third week, you're going to have the first week with their second vaccination and the third week. So you've got a gradual increase in data coming in. And it may be that it takes a lot longer than this, but let's say we're getting to the, so by the time we get to 6 weeks, we've got the data, theoretically, from all the first 4 weeks. Now, you may find that your 6th week, which is your second week vaccination of your 4th week population, you may find that you've decided that the risk is too high for your second dose, because the second dose from the first week, the second week, and the third week has resulted in significant adverse reactions. So that could be a time when you're taking a decision to not do the vaccination. But what's the risk? Well, there's no higher risk than death. So the risk from this COVID infection is death. But at what percentage? So you want to assess the risk of it causing an adverse reaction. Say that's 1%. And the risk of the actual virus causing the death. Well, let's say that's 3%. Well, you're going to go ahead, even though you know you've got a percentage of adverse reactions, you're going to say, right, we go ahead with the vaccinations because the risk of actually vaccinating is lower than the risk of somebody who's got the infection. But is that the right approach? Well, if you take it as simple as that, then it is. But what about the level of exposure? Well, maybe there's a 3% chance when they are infected that they're going to die. But what if the infection rate or exposure rate is only 5%? So then you've got 3% of 5%, which is significantly lower than the 1%. Oh, hold on a minute. Did I get that the right way around? Significantly lower than the 1% adverse reactions, because 5% of 3% is hard to do. Say if it was 5% of 1%, that would be 0.05. So that's 0.15. So it's 1.5% of the 1%. I think that's right. It might be 15% of the 1%. But either way, it's less than a fifth of the risk. So you say, okay, we don't go ahead. So that's an example of how risk management works. And as you get more and more data into your risk profile, then you make decisions, you make changes. Now, often I find that organizations use risk management, they do an annual review. That's not enough. You want to at least be doing a monthly review with your management review. Have we got any significant data that we need to consider the change in the risk profile for our business? Does that come forward? I rarely see it. So, if you would like some help in setting something like that up, I'm happy to talk to you. It's Paul Palmer. Talk to you soon.